Okay, Lord just spoke to me and said everything Pastor Rodney Howard Browne has is stolen. Everything. Everything he's built. And so it reminds me of a story that explains how this works. Back when I was in college, I didn't have a lot of money. I was a student, and back then $5 was worth a lot more than it is today. And I remember very specifically walking down the street, and there was a homeless guy, and I have $5 in my pocket. And the Lord spoke to me, told me to give that $5 to the homeless guy. Well, I didn't do it. A few minutes later, I forgot about it, and I was on my way somewhere, and I reached in my pocket, and I had that $5 bill in there, and the Lord spoke to me and said, that $5 is stolen. And then that really woke me up. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, when I told you to give that $5 to the homeless guy, at the point that God decides that $5 belongs to someone else, if you withhold it, it's stolen from that person. So the Lord was telling me that $5 was stolen from the homeless guy. So I went back and I found the guy and I gave him the $5. But in the same way, when God spoke to Rodney Howard Browne, told him to raise up 100 evangelists, when he did not do it, everything he did from that point on, especially in the area of evangelism, was stolen. So when Pastor Rodney went to Soweto, South Africa, he was stealing from the 100 evangelists. I'm pretty sure that if he was obeying God, he would have had Eric Gagnon preach in New York City in 1997. So Pastor Rodney's been stealing from God's people, and then from the pulpit using the same principles to take up offerings and telling the people that if you withhold from God, you're stealing from God. So I just had a vision of Pastor Rodney pleading with me, oh God, ask God for forgive me. I didn't mean to. And this is just recently, probably because everything's coming down on his head finally. And the answer is no. Go get a job, Pastor Rodney. Go earn the bread that you eat. You should be rejected as pastor. You should be divorced. Adonica should get the River Church and that property. You can have the big home, the big empty house, and the Mercedes, and all other assets. Matter of fact, Adonica should take it to trial and get 80% of the assets, including the house and the church. And that's probably what would happen because of the criminal threats, Pastor Rodney, that you're on video saying, I will tap you out. I don't want to have to tap you out, and your aggressive posturing. And then we look at Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. And then you consider what would happen if you went before a 12-panel jury to argue your case, and we're in the Bible Belt, and you're going to have 3 people on the jury who are Mennonites or Catholic or Episcopalian, a couple of people who are a Baptist, or maybe backslidden, but everybody on the jury is going to see your Satan face, Pastor Rodney, and side with sweet little Adonica, who's experienced criminal threats from her husband from behind the pulpit in front of everybody. And the word tap could mean, or it could mean, it's somewhat ambiguous. There's some ambiguity there. Just like what happened with Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. I'm just saying, you are a dangerous person, Pastor Rodney. You've shot and killed too many animals for sport. You know how easy it is to take something out at 400 yards, do you? I'm just saying. So, I hope you get what's finally coming to you. I hope Eric Gagnon finally gets to be the evangelist that he's called to be. I hope Timothy Eusta finally gets to be the preacher that he's called to be. I remember I talked to Timothy Houston in 2017. He was making $500,000 a year, and he said his only regret is he thought he'd be preaching by now. And that was in 2017. And it was just a random phone call that I made to him. And I was in the middle of being a targeted individual, and I was broke and good 20 years older than Timothy, and I was pretty jealous to find out he's making $500K a year, and I was barely surviving in the middle of being a targeted individual. At the time, I didn't know I was targeted, so everything, like my sales just fell apart. Anytime I got a sales job, somehow I just couldn't make any sales. And it was like, what's going on? Well, this guy was targeted, and I didn't know it. They were using a covert operation against me. Anyway, long story short, I mean, if I had been married, they couldn't have targeted me like they did. But Timothy should be preaching. Eric Gagne should be preaching. And they should actively go after and seek 100 evangelists to raise them up. Send them out to 100 nations of the world. And eject you, Rodney Howard Browne, from the fellowship completely.